Hi everyone, welcome to the parish. We are in week 9 of our 10-week series in the parables of Jesus. The last parable that we're going to study is going to take us the last 2 weeks. So today and next week we'll be reading from the same story. It's long and there's a lot to unpack. So today we'll do the first part. We know that parables are something that Jesus used to explain to his listeners what the kingdom of God was all about. And so in Luke 15, he tells a series of 3 parables in quick succession. We know that parables are stories that in and of themselves are not true, but there's truth in the stories. And so he was responding to a question from some critics when he told these stories in Luke 15. He told the story, first of all, of the lost sheep, which we studied several weeks ago. He also told the story of the lost coin, which we won't be studying, but I encourage you to take a look at that in Luke 15. In both of those cases, there was something that had been lost. The shepherd had lost one of his 100 sheep and went to great lengths to find it. In the next story, there was a woman who was poor. She was a widow, and she lost one of her 10 coins, and she went out of her way to great lengths to look for that. And in both cases, when those people found their lost items, they rejoiced. They called others to come and rejoice with them. Jesus was making a point when he told these stories. So in order to help us understand what point he was making, I want to start at Luke 15, verse 1. We'll kind of set up the scene here. It says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. So Jesus told them these stories, the stories of the lost sheep, the story of the lost coin, and then he said, a man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he returned home to his father. Let's stop there for a moment. The son had done several things that made him not be in the running for Son of the Year. First of all, he went to his father and asked for his inheritance. The father was still alive. So basically he was saying to his father, I wish you were dead. Give me my stuff. The second thing is he took the land that was given to him and he sold it. Now in this culture, that was a terrible thing to do. They were an agrarian society. They needed their land to survive. And you didn't just go out and buy land when you felt like it. You inherited land from your father and his grandfather and his father before him. It was ancestral land. And so to come along and decide you're just going to sell it and go spend the money on whatever you feel like was a shameful thing to do. It was not something that a good son would have done. At least not someone that culture considered to be a good son. Third, he was eschewing his religious heritage. He was from a Jewish culture that kept kosher, and so you would never hang out with pigs. You certainly would not want to eat their food. And it says something about how desperate this young man was. So desperate, recognizing, what have I let myself become? What have I gotten into? What have I lost by running away and humiliating my family? And now I'm humiliated myself. I'm wishing I could eat pig food. I'm meant for something better than this. And so the son takes the risk to go home. Now, why it was a risk was that in this culture, in their Hebrew scriptures, in the book of Deuteronomy, there's outlined a process that parents can go through if their son is rebellious. They can take their son to the elders and say, here are the ways in which he has rebelled against us. and we are humiliated. He has shamed us. And if the elders agreed that, yes, those are pretty terrible things your son did, they could actually have him stoned. They could have him executed. So this son was willing to take a risk because he was desperate. He took a risk going home, not knowing how he would be received. And so he prepared this speech that basically had 3 elements. I've done wrong. I don't deserve to be called your son. So please just hire me. Hire me so that I can have something to eat, so that I can have some measure of dignity, so that I can live a life that's not so desperate and so awful. And so the scriptures tell us that he went back to his father. And now we're picking up here in verse 19. It says he returned home, and when he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, the first element of his speech, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, the second element. Notice he doesn't even get to the third element, which is, please hire me, before the father replies. The father said to the servants, Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So the party began. Another story in Luke 15 about someone who was lost and a person who was very invested in getting that lost one back. Someone who called his friends to come and celebrate. And I don't want to miss the symbolism of the things that the father did here and the things that he gave to his son. First of all, it says that he ran to meet his son. This was not considered something that a dignified man in his station in life would do. But he was so eager to see that returning son that he ran. And the scriptures say that he was filled with tender love and compassion for his son. And so he called for several things to happen. First of all, he said, get the fattened calf. It's important to know that in this culture, they didn't eat meat every day. Meat was a rarity. Meat was a luxury. And so to call for that calf that they'd been fattening and saving for a special occasion, this demonstrated just how important the son's return was to the father. When he gave his son a robe, he was bestowing on him an official place in their home. It was traditional that a king would give a robe to his subject when he was giving that subject an official title and a rank. And so by giving a robe to his son, the father was saying, you are part of the family. You have a station here. You have merit. You have a rank here. You are not a hired servant. When he gave his son the ring, it would have been a signet ring. Signet rings were what you used to put your authority on something. It would be, for us, it would be like our legal signature. But the signet ring, each person had one. It was unique to them, to their family. It would have had their initials or their family crest on it, something that everyone knew belonged to them. So that when they were signing a contract, they dipped their ring in wax and pressed the wax onto the document. That was how they signed things. And so the father, in essence, by giving the son his signet ring, was saying, here are the keys to the car, the passwords to the accounts, here's our checkbook, here are the credit cards. All authority that I have is now bestowed onto you, and you can make decisions on behalf of our family with this ring. And finally, by inviting the neighbors to a party, the father was making a statement to the community. This is my beloved son. He's in my good graces. We're getting along well. Do not shame him. Don't treat him as an outsider. Don't ostracize him because he is part of my family. The neighbors must have thought he was nuts. This probably seemed like a really bad business decision to them. Why would you give this authority? Why would you give the passwords to your son who has squandered the money that he received before, the son who's shamed you and humiliated you. What kind of economy is this? But remember, we have talked over and over about the fact that when Jesus told these stories about the kingdom of heaven, what he was saying is, this kingdom isn't like any other kingdom that you've known. This isn't about business decisions. This is an economy of love. An economy of love where Jesus came in the flesh to restore and redeem, to bring us back to himself. This is a kingdom where Jesus says the greatest laws are love God with everything you have, love your neighbors as yourselves. These are the values of the kingdom of heaven. And so some have said this parable, which often gets called the prodigal son, should be the parable of the father who loved extravagantly and richly. And so Jesus was saying to these Pharisees who had the questions, he's saying, I am moved with tender love and compassion for my children. And anyone who wants to be part of me may come. In fact, I will go running to them. This takes us back to where we started, when these Pharisees were asking, what are you doing eating with these clowns? Why are you eating with these losers? They barely deserve scraps. They really don't even deserve to be let into the banquet. What are you doing with them? Jesus was saying, that's not what my kingdom is about. There's no religious hierarchy here. The people who are in and the people who are out. The people who are on top of the ladder and people who can barely even get on the ladder. That's not what God's kingdom is about. In God's kingdom, there are no losers. There are no second-class citizens. There are no hired hands. There are no servants. There are no slaves. There are only children of God in the kingdom of heaven. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me, and love has called my name. I've been born again into a family. Your blood flows through my veins. So I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. We're no longer slaves to fear. We are children of God. Now you're no longer a slave to fear. You are a child of God. You are a child of God. I pray for you the prayer the Apostle Paul prayed for the Ephesians. He said, I ask that Christ will live in your hearts through faith, and as a result of having those strong roots in love, I pray that you'll have the power to grasp love's width and depth and height. And I ask that the love of Christ that's beyond all measure is something that you will grasp so that you will be filled entirely with the fullness of God. Know that you are loved children of God. There are no second-class citizens. There are no pig slops. We are children of God. There's a big juicy steak with your name on it. You are beloved and precious and honored. You are an honored guest in the kingdom of God. Be blessed and live as children of God, people who know love and are able to give love as Christ loved us. Grace and peace.